Welcome to our channel. Pearl was a young girl with a soft heart and big dreams. She came from a quiet town where everyone knew everyone. Life was simple back then, but everything changed the day her parents died in a car accident. Pearl was only 12 years old. One day she had a home, and the next, she was alone in the world. No family stepped forward to take her in. She had to grow up quickly, learning how to survive one day at a time. By the time she turned 17, Pearl had found her way to the city. She thought she would find a better life there, maybe even go back to school. But the city wasn't what she imagined. It was full of noise, strangers, and broken promises. One woman, known as Madam, took her in. At first, Pearl was thankful. Madam gave her food, clothes, and a place to sleep. She told Pearl she would work as a housemaid and promised to help her settle down. But the truth soon came out. During the day, Pearl worked like a slave, washing clothes, scrubbing floors, cooking, and cleaning from morning till night. At night, Madam would send her out with heavy makeup and tight dresses to meet strange men. Pearl cried the first time it happened. She begged Madam to let her stop, but Madam only laughed and reminded her of the food she had eaten, the clothes on her back, and the debt she owed. Pearl was trapped. She hated the life. Every night she gave away a piece of herself just to survive. Men came and went, and she forced herself to smile while her heart broke inside. But no matter how hard it was, Pearl never gave up hope. Deep down, she believed her life could still change. She began saving every little money she was given, hiding it under her mattress. She told herself, "One day I will leave this place. I will be free." People in the house thought she was weak, but they didn't know she was stronger than she looked. Each night she looked at the stars through the tiny window in her room and whispered to herself, "This is not the end of my story." Pearl was a girl born into pain, shaped by hardship, but she carried something powerful inside her: determination. She didn't know how and she didn't know when, but she knew one thing for sure: she would not die a slave. Her journey was just beginning. For years, Pearl lived like a prisoner in Madam's house, smiling on the outside, dying on the inside. But she had a plan. Every time she was paid, no matter how small, she kept a little part of it. Sometimes she hid the money under a loose tile in the bathroom, sometimes in the lining of an old bag. She pretended to be obedient, never raising her voice, always saying, "Yes, madam." That was how she survived. That was how she saved. Many of the other girls gave up and stopped dreaming, but not Pearl. Each time she looked at her hidden money, she felt a spark of hope. She counted it over and over in secret. It wasn't much, but to her it was everything: her future, her escape. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. A rich politician came to the brothel. He asked for Pearl specifically. Madam dressed her up, painted her face, and warned her, "Please him well. This one has money to throw away." Pearl didn't want to go, but she had learned how to switch off her emotions. That night, the man paid a huge sum after spending only an hour with her. Madam was overjoyed. Pearl, however, was quiet. She knew this was her moment. Later that night, when the house was calm, Pearl knocked on Madam's door. "I want to talk," she said softly. Madam looked at her with suspicion but allowed her in. Pearl went on her knees and begged, "Please, madam, let me go. I have served you for years. I've paid my debt. I have some money. Take it. Just let me leave." Madam's face changed. "Leave," she repeated. "You think it's that easy?" But when Pearl brought out the bundle of money she had saved, all her years of pain in one small plastic bag, Madam paused. Greed took over her heart. She looked at the money, counted it twice, and finally said, "Fine. Take your things and go. Don't ever come back here." Pearl didn't wait. She rushed to her small room, packed her few clothes into a nylon bag, and walked out without saying goodbye. The gate creaked behind her as she stepped into the street, free at last. The night breeze kissed her face, and for the first time in a long while, she could breathe. She had no house, no family, and almost no money left, but she had something more powerful: freedom. And with it came a dangerous secret. Pearl had learned the ways of charm, how to trap men using their own desire. A woman from the brothel had taught her, warning her to use it wisely. At the time, it felt like protection. But now, as she stepped into the unknown, that charm would soon shape her future in ways she never imagined. Pearl walked into the darkness with hope in her heart and a secret in her soul. Pearl didn't waste time after leaving Madame's house. With the little money she had left, she found a small one-room flat in a quiet corner of the city. The room was not much, just a mattress on the floor, a curtain for a door, and a leaking roof, but to Pearl it was freedom. No shouting Madame, no forced work, no fear. She sat down one evening, looked around her new space, and smiled to herself. "This is the beginning," she whispered. Pearl knew she still had to survive. And since she had no education or certificate, she continued with prostitution, but this time on her own terms. No one would control her again. No one would take her money. She became her own boss. She started by dressing differently, elegant but not loud, classy but seductive. She would go to high-end bars and lounges where rich men gathered. She chose her customers carefully. No more drunkards or street boys. Only the ones who could pay well and stay quiet. Within weeks, her name started spreading among men who wanted something special. Pearl quickly became a top choice for politicians, businessmen, and married men looking for secret pleasure. Before she left the brothel, one of the older women had introduced her to a native spiritualist, a woman named Temi. Temi gave her something wrapped in red cloth and whispered, "This charm is not for protection alone. Use it wisely. It has a price." Pearl, tired of being used, had accepted it without thinking twice. The charm was simple to use. All she had to do was take the man's used condom, say some words over it, and keep it in a special clay pot. In return, the man would fall deeply in love with her, lose control of his mind, and give her anything she wanted. But there was a hidden danger. If she wasn't careful, the man could run mad. Some even lost their businesses, their families, their senses. But Pearl didn't care. She believed it was payback for what she had suffered. Money began to flow. She bought new clothes, new wigs, and even changed her phone. She rented a bigger flat in a better part of the city and started talking like a woman of class. To outsiders, she was just a pretty girl living the soft life. But in truth, she was building a quiet empire, one man at a time. Men would come into her life as kings and leave as beggars or madmen. Some even vanished without explanation. Pearl never looked back. Her heart had grown cold. She was now the boss of herself. But deep down, she had no peace. At night, she sometimes heard strange voices. In her dreams, she saw faces of the men she had used. But each morning, she would wear her makeup, step into her heels, and continue the game. Now, years later, the charm was still with her, hidden in a locked box beneath her bed. Each time she followed the ritual, her life changed. Her bank account grew. Her skin glowed without makeup. Men threw gifts at her: cars, dollars, houses. Some called her a goddess. Others warned their friends not to get too close. But the charm always took more than it gave. The first time, it was a wealthy contractor. After a night with Pearl, he returned home and started talking to himself. Within weeks, he was on the streets, mad and forgotten. Another, a respected pastor, lost everything: his church, his wife, his mind. Pearl pretended not to notice. She told herself it was coincidence. But deep inside, she knew what she was doing. The charm demanded loyalty. If she skipped the ritual even once, it would punish her. So she obeyed without question, collecting and offering what it asked for. The more she obeyed, the richer she became. But the men? Some died in their sleep. Some went missing. Some turned from millionaires to beggars within months. Each time she looked in the mirror, she saw beauty. But at night, her dreams were full of shadows, faces of the men she had destroyed, hands reaching out, mouths crying for help. Pearl had gained everything she once wished for, but deep in her soul, she knew she had made a deal with something far beyond her control. A deal that couldn't be broken. A charm that gave wealth but fed on the lives of others. And the charm was always hungry. Pearl had paid the price. Now others were paying it too. It started quietly. No thunder. No warning. He met Pearl at a private party and was instantly drawn to her. She didn't even try hard. One glance, one soft laugh, and he was hooked. They spent the night together in a hotel room filled with wine, perfume, and secrets. As always, Pearl collected his used condom, whispered the charm's words, and placed it inside her ritual pot at home. 3 days later, news broke. The politician was found walking naked in the middle of a busy market. He was shouting things no one could understand, calling out to dead relatives, throwing imaginary money in the air. People gathered, shocked. How could a man who addressed the nation last week now be talking to himself like a child? Pearl sat in her room, watching the news on her phone, face blank. She showed no emotion. She had learned to hide her reactions well. Then came the second man, a respected businessman who owned multiple fuel stations. He was one of Pearl's regulars. A quiet man, kind even. After one of their usual nights, Pearl followed the ritual. Just 2 weeks later, his company was hit with scandal. One station burned down, 2 others were sealed by the government, and his bank account was frozen. He tried to fight it, but things got worse. He sold his cars, then his house. Eventually, he was seen begging outside a supermarket in the same area he once ruled. Whispers began, but not about Pearl. No one connected the dots. How could they? She looked too innocent, too perfect. Even the broken men never mentioned her. Some didn't even remember her name. The charm didn't just destroy, it erased. Pearl continued her life as usual. She smiled at men in clubs, danced slowly in lounges, wore red lipstick and killer heels. Her name became more popular. The more trouble followed the men who slept with her, the more other men became curious. They wanted to taste what was so powerful it drove others mad. She must be special, they said. Maybe those men were just unlucky. And so they chased her. It was a quiet Sunday evening when Mama Ejiro knocked on Pearl's door. The older woman lived next door in the same compound, a retired nurse with sharp eyes and a gentle heart. She had watched Pearl from a distance, her flashy clothes, the expensive cars that came late at night, the mysterious air that followed her like perfume. "Pearl," she began softly, "can we talk for a moment?" Pearl stepped outside, looking elegant as always in her silk robe and gold slippers. She smiled, unsure of what the old woman wanted. "My daughter," Mama Ejiro said, "you are playing with fire. I may be old, but I've seen this kind of story before. Fast money, fast life, But the end, she shook her head slowly. The end is never sweet. Pearl chuckled politely. Thank you, Mama, but I'm doing just fine. Mama Ejiro looked at her for a long time. You think you have power, but power that comes from darkness always asks for more. And one day it will ask for what you cannot give. Pearl nodded as if she understood, but deep inside, she dismissed the warning. To her, Mama Ejiro was just an old woman talking out of fear and ignorance. Pearl believed she was different, special, protected. She had beaten the system, risen from nothing to something. What could an old woman possibly teach her? As Mama Ejiro walked away, Pearl closed her door and returned to her scented room. The charm sat quietly in its box, glowing faintly. She was convinced she was untouchable, but what she didn't know was that darkness always comes to collect, and it never knocks twice. Desmond was the kind of man that turned heads. Tall, dark, with smooth skin and sharp eyes, he carried himself with quiet confidence. He was a successful real estate developer, known for his clean record and loyal marriage. But that night, something changed. He had just had a heated argument with his wife, Amara, a misunderstanding that had grown into a storm. Harsh words were exchanged, and in a moment of rage, Desmond grabbed his car keys and drove off without direction. His heart was heavy, his mind clouded. He didn't usually drink, but that night he ended up in a high-end club on the island, trying to clear his head with loud music and strong whiskey. That was when he saw her. Pearl. Pearl was used to the routine. Please the man. Wait until he slept. Collect what the charm needed. Whisper the words and let the darkness do its work. It had never failed her, not once. Men always fell and she always rose. That night with Desmond was no different, at least not in the beginning. She had given him everything. Her charm, her touch, her best performance. Desmond responded like any other man, lost in her body and forgetting his pain. Afterward, he lay beside her, breathing slowly, eyes closed, completely at peace. Pearl sat up silently, wrapped herself in a silk robe, and tiptoed to her small shrine. She reached for the charm bag, her black velvet pouch filled with items that had built her wealth, her beauty, her so-called power. Carefully, she opened it and dropped the used condom inside, just like always. Then she began to chant the words Mama Tolu had taught her years ago, words she could now say in her sleep. But then, pain, a sharp, burning pain exploded in her palm. The charm bag suddenly turned hot, red hot, and flames leapt from it like it was alive. Pearl screamed and dropped it. The bag fell to the floor, smoking. Her hand was blistered, skin peeling, red and raw. The scream echoed through the flat. Desmond woke up instantly and rushed to the living room, shirtless and alarmed. Pearl, what happened? She clutched her hand, hiding the charm bag with her body. Hot water, she gasped. I was trying to make tea. It spilled. Desmond stared at her for a moment. His eyes were searching, unsure. But then he sighed and nodded. Let me get the first aid box. Pearl forced a smile and nodded, trying to steady her breathing. He believed her. Or maybe he just didn't want to know the truth. But deep down, Pearl knew this was no normal accident. The charm had rejected Desmond. Worse, it had turned on her. She waited until he went back to bed before picking up the bag with the cloth. It was no longer hot, but the burn on her hand throbbed with pain. The scent of herbs and smoke filled the room. She looked at the charm with fear. It had never burned her before. It had never fought back. Tears filled her eyes. What was going on? Who exactly was Desmond? And why did the charm, the same one that had never failed her, burn her for trying to use it on him. For the first time since she began this dark journey, Pearl felt a crack in her confidence. This was no ordinary man, and this was no ordinary night. Pearl couldn't sleep. Her hand was still sore from the burn, and her mind kept replaying the strange moment over and over. The charm bag bursting into flames, the pain, the scream, the lie she told Desmond. None of it made sense. This had never happened before. Dozens of men had fallen without a fight. Why not Desmond? The next morning, as soon as Desmond left her apartment to take a business call, Pearl locked the door behind him and headed straight to her shrine. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the charm bag again, this time wearing gloves. "I must have done something wrong," she muttered to herself. She removed Desmond's condom, placed it on a white cloth before the charm pot, lit 3 candles, and sprinkled salt in a circle. Then she began the chant, slowly, carefully, exactly as Mama Tolu had taught her. But before she could finish, a gust of cold wind blew through the closed room. The flames on all 3 candles flickered, then died. Her heart began to race. She repeated the chant louder, desperate. The shrine suddenly shook. The charm pot rattled violently on its own. The walls felt like they were humming. Then, a deep, guttural voice echoed through the room. "This one is protected." Pearl froze. Her lips stopped moving. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor in fear. The voice wasn't angry. It was powerful, calm, final. As if it came from something far older and stronger than the charm she served. She had never heard a voice before. Her rituals had always been silent. This was new and terrifying. She crawled back, staring at the charm pot like it was a stranger. The condom sat untouched, unmoved by her offering. The pot rejected it completely. Protected? By who? Why Desmond? Pearl sat there in shock, her mind racing. Could Desmond be involved with something stronger? A spiritual covering? A praying wife? Maybe someone had warned him? No, it didn't matter. All she knew was that the charm had spoken, and for the first time in her life, she had found a man she could not control. Later that evening, when Desmond returned, he smiled as though nothing had happened. He made her laugh, brought food, and treated her like a queen. But to Pearl, everything had changed. She looked at him differently now, not just as a man, but as a mystery. Desmond was not like the others, and now that the charm had rejected him, she couldn't decide whether she was scared or drawn to him even more. But one thing was certain: if he was truly protected, then someone or something was watching. And Pearl's game was no longer safe. Desmond sat in his car outside his home, staring at the front door he had once walked through with pride. It had been weeks since the fight with Amara, his wife. The anger that pushed him away that night had cooled, replaced with guilt. He missed her quiet strength, her prayers, her unwavering love. He had tried to call. She didn't answer. He sent messages. She read them but gave no reply. So that morning, Desmond returned home, holding a small bag of groceries and a heart full of apologies. Amara opened the door and stared at him like he was a stranger. "I came to talk," he said softly. "I was wrong to walk out. I miss you." But Amara shook her head, her eyes red. "You broke something, Desmond. I don't know if I can trust you again." She didn't slam the door, but she didn't invite him in either. She just turned around and walked away, leaving him standing there, ashamed and confused. Desmond got back into his car, heavy-hearted. But something deeper began to trouble him, not just guilt. It was Pearl. Something about her didn't sit right anymore. Her eyes, her energy. the strange dreams he had after sleeping with her. He couldn't explain it, but he felt drained. He started to ask questions quietly. He even drove past her apartment once without entering. Then he visited a close friend, a pastor, who directed him to a prophet known for deep spiritual insight. The old prophet welcomed him, laid hands on his head, and prayed for minutes without speaking. Then he opened his eyes slowly and said in a deep voice, "You slept with a woman of darkness." Desmond's heart froze. "She carries a charm of destruction, but it did not touch you." "Why?" Desmond asked, shaking. The prophet nodded. "Because your wife's tears covered you. Her prayers wrapped around your soul like fire. You were protected, not by your strength, but by her pain." Desmond sat in silence, stunned. "You must not go back to that woman. She is not who she seems. Her path leads to madness, and her hands drip with secrets." Desmond left the prophet's house shaken to the core. Everything made sense now. The strange burn on Pearl's hand, the fear in her eyes, the cold air in her apartment. She had tried to take something from him, but it didn't work. He wasn't just lucky, he was saved. By the same woman he had hurt. By the same tears he had caused. That night, Desmond drove past Pearl's apartment once more, but he didn't stop. He looked up at her window, then whispered, "Never again." Pearl had no idea. Her grip on him was gone, and Desmond was finally waking up. Desmond knew the only way to end this nightmare was to confront it head on. He couldn't rest knowing what Pearl had tried to do to him, and what she might be doing to others. The prophet's words echoed in his ears. Her path leads to madness. Desmond had escaped, but how many others were falling? So he made a plan. He returned to Pearl, wearing a fake smile and pretending to miss her. "I've been thinking about you," he told her, his voice low and smooth. "I can't stay away." Pearl, though surprised, welcomed him with open arms. Part of her was suspicious. He had gone silent for days, but his charm, his voice, the way he looked at her, melted her doubts. She didn't know he had already seen a prophet. She didn't know her secret was no longer safe. She poured him wine. They laughed. She touched his face and called him my king. As the evening grew darker, Desmond planted a tiny recorder in his pocket and turned it on. He had one goal, proof. Pearl led him to the bedroom like before. But this time, Desmond was in control. He watched every move, listened carefully, and waited. When she thought he was fully distracted, Pearl stood up and walked to her shrine. Desmond followed quietly, still shirtless, pretending to admire her. From a hidden compartment beneath a table, Pearl brought out the charm bag, her black pouch of power. As soon as she opened it, Desmond stood up straight. "That's it," he said sharply. Pearl froze. "What do you mean?" Desmond's face changed. Gone was the playful look. His eyes were serious now. "That's what you used on all those men, isn't it? That bag, that charm. You thought it would work on me too." Pearl's hands trembled. "Desmond, what are you talking about? You're scaring me." He pulled the recorder from his pocket and waved it. "I've been recording everything. Every word. Every sound. You're finished, Pearl." Her lips parted in shock. "You set me up?" "Yes," Desmond said firmly. "Because you're not just a woman. You're a destroyer. Men are losing their minds, dying, going broke, and you're behind it all." Pearl backed away slowly, eyes wide. "No, you don't understand. I only used it to protect myself, to survive. It wasn't supposed to go this far." Desmond stepped closer. "It went far the day you decided to trade bodies for souls." Pearl burst into tears, dropping the charm bag on the floor. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Desmond. I tried. I swear I tried to stop." He didn't flinch. I'm not here to pity you. You played with darkness, and now the light has come. The charm bag lay between them, silent, powerless, exposed. Pearl's secret was no longer hidden, and Desmond was no longer her victim. He had become her judgment. The next morning, the storm began. Desmond didn't waste time. He drove straight to the local police station and handed them the video recording. He also sent it to a trusted prophet who had been following the case spiritually. She's using dark charms, Desmond said plainly, and she's destroying lives. The authorities hesitated at first. Pearl didn't look like the type. Beautiful, calm, well-spoken. But when they saw the video, watched her open the charm bag, heard her soft voice chanting over what should never be touched, they knew something was wrong. A combined team of police officers, journalists, and spiritual leaders arrived at her house that afternoon. They didn't knock. They stormed in. Pearl was in the living room, dressed in her usual fine gown, sipping wine as if the world wasn't about to collapse. When she saw the crowd, her glass dropped to the floor. Pearl Kayamaka Okari, one officer said, "You are under arrest for spiritual manipulation, ritual practices, and suspected connection to mental breakdowns and financial ruins." Her legs gave way. They dragged her to the shrine room. What they found there silenced everyone. Dozens of used condoms were stored in labeled containers, some marked with dates, initials, and even the amount of money the man had given her. There were charms wrapped in red cloth, feathers, black soaps, blood-stained items, and burnt bones. A large clay pot stood at the center of the room, its mouth sealed with wax and cowries. The prophet stepped forward and immediately began to pray. "This place reeks of destruction," he said. News spread quickly. Within hours, the story was trending across social media and local TV. Beautiful lady behind men's madness caught with juju items in Lagos. Neighbors were shocked. No one had suspected a thing. But the real shock came when men began to come forward. A madman who had once been a politician was brought by his sister. As soon as he saw Pearl's photo on the screen, he screamed, "That's her. That's the woman who stole my mind." Another, now living under a bridge, whispered, "She told me she loved me. I gave her my house." Even a former pastor, now blind in one eye, was identified in her visitor log. He wept bitterly. "I thought she was a blessing. I didn't know she came from darkness." Each story had one thing in common, Pearl. Some women from the community even broke down in tears. "My husband changed after meeting her," one cried. "He lost his job. He talks to the wall now." Pearl sat in handcuffs, her face pale, her lips trembling. For the first time in years, she had no power, no control, no charm to hide behind. She was exposed, and the world now saw the real Pearl, not the beauty, not the boss lady, but the darkness she had carried and fed for years. Pearl was no longer the goddess of the night. Her beauty, once the source of her power and pride, vanished like smoke in the wind. Her skin, once glowing and admired, became pale, dry, and full of sores. Her eyes lost their sparkle. Her voice cracked like broken glass. She could not look at herself in the mirror anymore. The charm that had once brought her wealth and attention was now her greatest punishment. Her body began to rot slowly, as if eaten from the inside. Her scent, once sweet and tempting, turned foul. Flies followed her. Even children ran away when they saw her. The same men who once begged to be with her now crossed the road to avoid her. Some spat at her feet. Others pointed and mocked her. "See what greed brings," they whispered. "She used charm to destroy lives. Now look at her." Pearl tried to explain, to cry for help, but no one listened. Her former friends abandoned her. The madam who trained her refused to recognize her. Her house was seized. Her business collapsed. She became a shadow, hiding during the day and wandering at night like a cursed ghost. Desmond's wife, the one she had tried to destroy, looked at her one day with pity. "You thought you were winning," the woman said, "but God sees everything." Pearl fell to the ground, tears soaking the dust. She was alone, rejected, forgotten. That was the price of her charm. That was the shame she could not escape. She had gained everything but lost her soul. Pearl died alone in a forgotten shrine, hidden deep within the forest. She had crawled there, weak and broken, begging for mercy from the very spirits she once served. But none answered. Her cries faded into silence. No one mourned. No one claimed her body. Her story, however, did not die with her. It spread across towns and cities, whispered in salons, churches, and markets. Mothers used her name as a warning to their daughters. "Don't follow Pearl's path," they said. "Easy money can cost you your life." Men, too, became cautious. They remembered the madness, the losses, the fear. No one wanted to end like those who had touched her. Desmond, now a changed man, stood one Sunday before his church. His wife sat beside him, her eyes filled with quiet strength. "I was almost destroyed," he said, "but I was given another chance. Not all that glitters is gold. Learn from Pearl's fall. Guard your heart, your body, and your soul." The congregation sat in silence. A lesson had been learned. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, share it with someone. Remember, choices have consequences. Stay safe,